Welcome, my engineered in stitches friend. I'm going to try and show you how to make the new Variant style bag, but using a slightly different method. I need to test out the small size, the 130 by 180 hoop size, to see if it works, and I thought I'd use that to show you a different method where you can use continuous fabric. So I've followed the instructions to a certain extent. I've got tearaway stabiliser in the hoop, I've stitched the first colour and I've covered it with a piece of my thin wadding. This is bump curtain interlining. There's a little bit extra along the bottom of the design, you'll need that later, and I've trimmed around the right hand and top edges of colour number 2. I haven't trimmed around the left hand edge because this interlining, this wadding, is what we're going to need for the rest of the bag. I'm going to cover this with a piece of my main fabric, which is this nice doggy one. Make sure I get the doggies the right way up, and I'm using this continuous method so I don't have to have any seams cutting dogs in half, because that wouldn't be fair, would it? It wouldn't be very friendly. So that's going to, I'm feeling where that is, make sure it overlaps by about 1 centimetre at the top, perhaps a little bit more down the right hand side, because it can pull in a little bit with the quilting. And I'm going to put that back on the machine, and the next colour we'll do the quilting. Just make sure the fabric stays smooth, keep an eye on it, there's no need to baste it in place unless you're using a particularly awkward fabric. I'm using black thread so that it will show up well for you. I'm using the same colour thread for everything. And while this is stitching the quilting, I'll just show you what I've done for the handles. I've folded and pressed some fabric, you can see the fold there, I hope, and I've used some sticky hem stuff in between. It isn't very permanent, but I am planning to top stitch this later, which I'll show you what I mean. You can top stitch it now if you want to, but I've decided not to. This tiny bag is not suitable for doing with the plastic tubing handles. I must say that, it would be totally impractical both to do and to use. So there isn't a handle design for this bag. Perhaps better talk amongst yourselves while this stitches, but I don't want to divide the video up into too many sections. So my pieces of fabric and my piece of wadding are the panel sizes given in the instructions, but multiplied by 4, so I've got all 4 panels side by side, and that's the extra fabric that's hanging over the left hand edge. So they're all the same size as the lining basically. This little bit extra hanging over the bottom is going to be important later to create the bottom of the bag. Stitching away nicely, straight through a Dalmatian there. Got 2 more points to do. Now I've decided not to add a decorative design to this one. If you want to add one to yours, then you add it after the quilting. And when you aim it in the design, don't put it dead centre, put it slightly below the centre, because it will look better, because the handle part is across the top and it will look a bit strange if it's too high up. So I did experiment with this a bit on the others. I keep trying to pick up bits of the outline off the dog because I think it's a bit of black thread. Right, so there's the quilting done. I've got all the spare fabric to the left. The next colour will just show where the handle has to go. And there it is. Now it's moving on now to the next colour, which is a seam, and obviously we don't need that this time. So we'll move it back to where it's going to stitch the handle. Now my handle's 2 centimetres wide, that's quite important for this size, it can be bigger for the others. You could use a braid. If you're going to use a braid, put it face down, so the pretty side shows when you flip it back. This is my folded fabric. I'm just going to cover the placement line and make sure there's about 1 centimetre sticking up. And I'm going to let that stitch across right through the poodle's nose. Stitches backwards and forwards, or forwards and backwards, so that the handle's nice and firmly fixed in. And the next colour is to add the lining. So that goes level with everything else, just to the right hand side, with all the spare lining going over the rest of the bag. And we can sew the next colour, which will go across the top, across the handle and down the left hand side. And that does look a bit strange, doesn't it? But there we have it. So that's the first panel of the bag completed. I'm going to take it out of the hoop. I'm going to trim off around here, leave all the rest of the fabric on, just trim around here, snip into these curved edges so that it turns through nicely. And I'll see you in a minute for the second panel.